All right, hi. Federal Railroad Administration, Office of Railroad Safety, Operating Practices Compliance Manual, November 2012. We're on Chapter 4. Chapter 4, Railroad Operating Rules, Part 217, Introduction. Inspectors must have the thorough knowledge of the railroad operations in their assigned territory. The knowledge is acquired by studying each of the railroad operating rules, timetables, special instructions, general orders, etc. Each of the inspectors must become familiar with the railroad operations in his or her own territory. Within the territory, each of the inspector must include a periodic inspection observation to determine the degree of compliance with the operating safety rules of each railroad. Additional inspectors must track accidents, trends in their assigned territory, especially those attributed to human factors. Site-specific inspections should be performed on the basis of National Inspection Plan (NIP), and each inspector knowledge of his or her own territory. The National Inspection Plan allocates inspection to higher risk areas. The National Inspection Plan does not change how the inspector conducts the inspection. The National Inspection Plan relies on accurate regional inspection point data. The guidance of this chapter is intended to be general in nature, does not replace the language of in any applicable rules or statutes. For a more detailed discussion of specific subject matter, refer to Part 217, Title 49, Code Federal Regulations, Training Reference Guides, Operational Practice Technical Bulletins, and FRA Letters of Interpretation. The analysis testing data guidance. Inspectors should reference Chapter 18 and 19 of this manual. Further guidance, general guidance, 217.1 purpose. Through the requirements of the Part 217, the FRA learns the condition of operating rules and practices with respect to trains and other rolling equipment in the railroad industry. Each of the railroad is required to instruct the employees in operating practices. 217.7 operating rules, filing record and record keeping. Inspectors should review and remain the current of the code of the operating rules, timetable, special instructions to each of the railroad in their territory. If the inspector demonstrates the railroad does not have the acceptable level of the required documents, the inspector should consult with his or her operational practice regional specialists and other inspectors whose territory may also be affected by inspectors' concerns. The all parties involved that are inspected to cooperate in the joint plan that will bring the railroad into compliance. This plan was implemented after efforts should be documented in inspection reports of the memorandum instruction by the operating practice regional specialist in charge, perhaps used as evidence of the FRA efforts that further enforcement action becomes necessary. 217.9 program operational testing and record keeping. The observation of the railroad manager conducting the operating testing is the primary essential task of the operating practice inspectors and nationwide agency priority. The operational testing inspection should be used to impartially assess the railroad efforts to develop and maintain effective safety oversight program, not to form a basis for employee disciplinary action or to criticize the railroad manager for the deficiency in the program. An inspector should always be careful to watch and determine how operational tests are recorded and should ensure the railroad adequately addresses any of the discrepancies noted. Inspection regarding the import of the railroad operations are performed reviewing the operating testing data, observing the railroad operational testing efforts. Comparing the inspector finding the FRA inspection data and the accident incident data for the specific territory affect the FRA's inspection rely heavily on the accurate reading of the operating testing data of the railroad managers. 217.9b requirements to conduct operational testing and inspection. This section is reserved for a later date. 217.9c written program of operational tests and inspection. A railroad operating testing program on the file of the FRA should, at the minimum, provide operational testing inspection under the various operating conditions of the railroad, various times, the variety of the location, and the particular and address the particular emphasis of those operating rules that cause or are likely to cause the more accident incidents, such as accident incidents identified with the quarterly review, 6-month reviews, annual summaries. Required a minimum number of testing and inspection per covering of the requirements of the Title 49 CFR Part 218 Subpart F. Describe each of the operational testing inspection required, included the means of the proceed used to carry them. State the purpose of each of the type of the operational testing inspection. State and according the operational division where applicable the frequency with each of the operating test inspection to be conducted. Identify the name, job title, division, system of the railroad manager who is responsible for ensuring the program of the operational testing and inspection properly implemented. Require a record of the date and time and place result of each operational test and inspection that was performed in accordance with the railroad program. Require a record of the specified with the railroad manager that performed the operational test and for observation of each of the employee tested. Mandated data review operational testing result. Required adjustment for the program operating testing according with the mandated a quarterly review of the regulations required. Monthly 6-day month review with regulations require. Note that only the FRA Associated Administrative Railroad Chief Safety Officer may cause disapproval of the operating testing program for the field of the operation practices. Inspectors should limit the scope of the review of the program to determine whether the implementation of the program is in compliance with the operating testing of the program on the file. Issuing regard of the program itself must be evaluated through the region chains command, but prior to the decision it will with provided railroad involved. Inspectors should review the operating testing data in the territories and high priority perform the essential task frequency. 217.11 Program Instruction Operating Rules Guidance Review of the Railroad Operating Training Material. Railroad employees whose activities are governed by the railroad operating rules are required to understand the operating rules each railroad was in section applies with the periodically instructions to each employee on the meaning and the application of the railroad's operating rules in accordance with the written program. The program shall describe the mean, the procedure used in the instruction of the various classes of the affected employees, state the frequency of instruction, the basis determining the frequency includes the schedule of completing the initial instruction of the employees who are already employed with the program begins. To provide the initial instruction of each of the employee hired after the program begins. Guidance. Inspectors attending the railroad operating rules. Inspectors may review the training materials, testing, monitoring classrooms training regarding the section. The purpose of the inspection is to determine whether the railroad is the following its own 217.11 program. Inspectors should review the operational instructional material prior to attending the training. The inspector report should include the information regarding what the inspector found with the railroad properly complying with its own training programs. When monitoring the operating rules classes, the FRA mission to observe the rule class. The inspector should avoid distracting the class. Should not defer the interpretation of the railroad operating rules. For the FRA inspector, the forbidden with the interpreting rules and operating rules. The FRA inspectors may take an exemption to the rules that conflict with the federal regulations. They should never offer any type of the interpretation of a railroad's operating rule. If the inspector takes issue with the railroad implementation of the training program, he or she discusses his or her regional operating practice specialist, taking an exemption to either verbally or any inspection. The regional operational practice specialist must consider whether the same program is an effort in the inspector's territory or another FRA region to ensure the FRA is consistent with the enforcement. Inspection reports for the monitoring of the railroad implementing operating rules training class or material description comment on the railroad company activity 217C. 1. Observe the GCOR safety review class in Lincoln, Nebraska for the Nebraska Railroad TYNE. And personnel. The instruction removed the GCOR rules relating to the Title 49 CFR Title 8, Section 218.99, shoving and pushing movements of GOCR Rule 6 and .5, 49 CFR 218.101. Leaving the equipment in the clear, the GCR Rule 7.1 and the Title 49 CFR Section 232.103, and securement of the unintended equipment. GCR Rule 7.6 rules are complied with the elements of the railroad program's instruction. Alright, this is an inspection report example of the monitored railroad compliance with the railroad operating description, non-FRA defective active code 217.0. Exemption noted that I observed that the crew of the locomotive of the NRB Nebraska 2130 conducting switching operation in the Great View Yard of October 31st, 2009. At approximately 11:03, observed the employee of the track 05 between the equipment before the on-the-track equipment had completely stopped, and identified the disgust of the unsafe employee that I contact with employee supervisor and informed that they had been observed the failure to comply with the ROR GCOR 2002 and will record exemption to the switch operation fatal analysis recommendation number 1. Introduction to 217.0 line item for the multiple inspection records that include the activity codes 218.0, 232X, 220, 218U, 218M, 240, and 217R within 1 yard. Description comment railroad company activity set 217.0. I conducted an inspection of the Nebraska Railroad Osborne Yard regarding the railroad operating rules, railroad safety rules, switches, securement, unattended equipment, shoving movements, derails, radio procedures, utility employees, blue flag protection, locomotive engineer, certification. Many in the inspection, including the riding of the Nebraska Railroad, after the switch of the job, have switched to the Osborne Yard tracks at 10:12, notifying the crew of the intent of the monitoring radio's procedure to conduct the radio monitoring of the many inspection while riding with the Nebraska switch crew on board the Nebraska Locomotive 111. Notified the Nebraska Railroad, Johnny Rogers, along with the involved crew, of all the exceptions noted in this report. Note, if the operational practice is observingly employed by the other hosting railroad, the inspector will provide the inspection report addressed to the railroad employee for the railroad employees observed, provided courtesy copy of the host railroad when warranted. Insert chapter tabs here. Chapter 5, Part 218, Subpart C and D.